and beyond. On our website, keystonechurchpa.com, there's some different options in which you can give and support the ministry. We're so glad that you're here today and hope this message encourages you with the hope of Jesus. Here today, Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. This is in the ESV. Here's what it says. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I'll show you, and I'll make you a great nation. I'll bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I'll curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went, that's an important phrase to remember, as the Lord had told him. Pray with me one more time here this morning. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to open up your word. Thank you, God, that you will give us ears to hear, hearts to receive everything your scripture has to say to us here this morning. God, I pray that we would see through your word how our faith walk, Lord, how we can trust you, we can remain committed to you because, Lord, you've always been faithful to fulfill your word in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. So one night, a house caught fire, and there was a young boy who was forced to flee to the roof. The father stood on the ground with outstretched arms, calling to his son, "Jump, I'll catch you." He knew the boy had to jump to save his life. All the boy could see, however, was flame, smoke, and darkness. As you can imagine, he was afraid to leave the roof. His father kept yelling, "Jump, I'll catch you." But the boy kept saying, "Daddy, I can't see you." The father replied, "But I can see you, and that's all that matters." Abraham, in the scripture, in Genesis, is known as the father of faith, and his life was marked by this spiritual characteristic. And this morning, I really want to pull back the intimidation factor on this particular subject. I want to help answer what is faith? How are we to live by this? And if you were to even ask a definition, what is it? Well, Hebrews 11:1 says this, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." The Greek word for that word faith in Hebrews is pistis. It means the state of being someone in whom confidence can be placed. It's like, who can I put my confidence in? Who can I rely on? Who can I trust on? We know the answer. It's the Lord, of course. But oftentimes when we hear the subject of faith, or when I've heard it taught in church, many questions can come up when it comes to this particular topic. Do I have enough of it? What does it even mean? How does it increase in my life? And as we unpack this subject, we could talk for a long time about it. There's more to cover than just this Sunday, what I'm going to talk about today. Because when it comes to this subject, I've heard many messages, some that were very theologically sound and some that were not. Some that were encouraging, some that were discouraging. And it's important to know that this subject can get clouded for a lot of different reasons. But I want to first hopefully explain what faith is not so that we can gain a greater understanding of what faith is. And we're going to hone in on Abraham's faith walk, because I want this message to be crazy practical for every single one of us. Because I hope you know this, if you're in church here on Sunday morning, you probably get a measure of this already because you're here, because we worship, but you have and you serve a God that has good plans for your life, that wants to answer prayers that you pray, and that wants to move on your behalf so that his plan can be more fulfilled in your life. How many of you guys believe that? 4 people. Great, it's awesome. Now we're going to dive into this and see, first of all, here's what faith is not. Faith is not self-centered. It's not self-centered. Only praying and believing and trusting God for something, what I would consider selfishly in your life, is not the essence of what faith is all about. Faith is not, that is not the clear definition biblically of what true faith really is. Because God's not an ATM machine. He's not a genie in a bottle. He's not here to just serve and satisfy all of our self-centered or even selfish needs or desires that we may have. Jesus is far more interested in your character development than your comfort. He wants to see your spiritual character formed rather than, at times, I've almost heard it communicated that our faith is really just to make our current situation a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable. And I think that we could see enough through Scripture, and we're going to unpack Abraham's story, where that's not the case at all. In fact, walking a life that's marked by faith is more about stepping into the unknown where it's uncomfortable and there are a lot of unanswered questions, but you're still staying faithful and you're trusting the one that has the answers. Faith is also not based on feelings. We mentioned this last week when it comes to our walk with the Lord. When we go through a preparation season, that our emotions can lie to us and deceive us. And oftentimes when it comes to our feelings, I've sat under people that have communicated messages like, if you didn't get something in your life that you were praying for, perhaps it was because you just didn't have enough faith, or you didn't pray the right way, or you didn't do the right things. Certain people, sure, they have enough faith, but you, perhaps you didn't have enough of what you really needed to believe God for. And we even see through Scripture, Jesus references a mustard seed-sized faith, and how the size of our faith is really not the issue, meaning the circumstances don't determine whether or not I have faith. My commitment to the Lord and my walk with Him determines whether or not I'm seeing this faith lived out. It's not rooted in our emotions. Faith is rooted in our convictions. And faith is also not false reality. And without getting on a soapbox, I will tell you there is a kind of a movement that I've seen on social media, where you see people, they are trying to manifest a reality that isn't quite there yet for their life. So here's what faith is not. Faith is not standing in a place saying, I'm a millionaire, 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 Lord, bring the money, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire. That is not faith. Okay, and by the way, there is nothing wrong with, this is where faith and the subject of goal setting and dreams can get muddied and clouded. There is nothing wrong with having a dream and a desire to build something, advance something, grow something, and perhaps you do have something in the future that you're looking to attain. That can be very worthy and full of integrity. It's when it becomes all about you and you alone, and it's like what I can get for my benefit to advance myself selfishly. That kind of a mentality is not biblical faith. Faith is more about the journey of following Jesus rather than acquiring something from Jesus. Meaning, believing and following God's word is the basis of faith. And we're going to see the genuine, true faith walk that Abraham was defined by. And I'm just going to give you some phrases that might just help frame this in, and we're going to see through the Scripture how this all is connected. But faith, first of all, it anchors you. A true faith walk anchors your life. We read it in 2 Thessalonians 3:3 that the Lord is faithful. He'll strengthen you. He'll protect you. There's questions oftentimes when we go through life. Is God really going to come through? Is He going to let me down like others have let me down? Why should I trust you, God? Why should I have faith in you when others in my life have proven to be so untrustworthy? I always thought in my life that God was going to fail me and not be true to His word because I had a pattern of people in my life that had let me down and that weren't faithful to their word. So I associated that at some point, it's only a matter of time, God's going to fall into that exact same category. He is not going to be who He says He is. But when we look back, when we reflect on our life, and I'm telling you, if you took inventory right now, just at your seat, if you thought back to where you were 5 years ago, to where you were 10 years ago, to where you were 20 years ago, and if you followed the Lord the last couple decades, or even the last 10 years, or 5 years, whatever it may be, and you really looked back, you would see how faithful God has been, even when you didn't see it in that moment. But now in the future, you look back, you're like, man, God was so incredibly faithful. God bailed me out. God saved me from this circumstance or this situation. Or the way I thought something was going to play out, it worked out completely opposite. But you know what? God was faithful the entire time. We can follow the Lord because he's always been faithful. We serve a God that's always kept his word, and we see it in the Old Testament and the New Testament, but it was all about a covenant. It was a covenant. It was this agreement between two people like, hey, I'm going to hold up my end of the agreement, the bargain. You're going to hold up your end of the bargain. And then we're going to have this relationship. We're going to have this arrangement. But God has always been faithful to back up his end of the arrangement, even when we as humans, even as we have fallen away or walked away or abandoned our commitment to him, God has never forsaken us. We see it with Abraham's life. Faith is trusting in God enough to wait on his perfect timing. It's not grasping or reaching or working outside the lines. Check this out. Abraham's faith was not a perfect example. And I want you to wrap your mind around this. The Bible talks about Abraham being the father of faith, and yet Abraham's life was not perfect. Do you know how encouraging that is for me to read? Or how encouraging that should be for all of us to see? That God doesn't expect us to be perfect even when we are walking in faith and trusting him. There are going to be times where we're not going to get it right. There are going to be times where we get off the path, but God reassures and reminds Abraham that he is always going to come through. This covenant is made. God's telling him about this land, this people that he's going to inherit. And then Abram makes this statement. Look at this in Genesis 15:8. But Abram said, "Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I'll gain possession of it?" So I want you to think about it like this. It's like somebody telling you, God's telling Abraham, I'm going to fulfill this promise. This is your destiny. This is where you're headed. This is where you're going. I am reassuring you, Abraham, that I'm going to be faithful to my word. And then the very next phrase is Abraham saying, but really, God, how's it going to happen? And God's like, would you just trust me? I saw it this week with my daughter. She was putting some clothes in the laundry. She was asking me fatherly advice. Dad, can I put these dark colors on this wash cycle? And I'm like, of course you can. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, I am sure. I've done laundry. I'm an adult. I know how to work the machine. And then after I say that, she goes, I'm going to go ask mom. I'm like, fair enough. You don't trust your father. And that happens to us sometimes. It's like we're aiming to want to have our faith rooted in the Lord, but we don't always get it right. In chapter 16 of Genesis, you go back and read it. So the Lord's already said, Abraham, I'm going to fulfill my promise through you. Abraham's questioning the promise. He's kind of wavering a little bit. Then in chapter 16, Abraham takes matters into his own hands. He doesn't see God fulfill his promise on his timeline, so Abraham decides, I'm going to go make the promise happen myself. He goes and he sleeps with his wife's servant and says, this is how our child is going to come about. This is how I'm going to have a son. That's where Ishmael was born before Isaac. And so there's this process where even Abraham, being marked by faith, he's being challenged in staying faithful, and yet God always remains and stays who he is. So we're going to always be able, as we're anchored in our faith, to be able to look back on his faithfulness. And I promise you, one day, if you're serving the Lord, one day when we get to heaven, we don't see it right now. Right now, it's a temporary vantage point. But one day in eternity, all of our questions are going to be answered. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to stand before God and it's going to be like, there's going to be a 2-hour DVD, like a special that we're going to be able to see. It's going to be what you did. And the Lord's like, if you just would have done this, it would have, this would have happened. Don't you see where I was faithful? And you see where you screwed up? I don't know how it's going to be. But I do believe that one day it's going to be like we're going to be in awe of Christ. We're going to be standing before him, and it's going to be like we didn't see it here on earth, but we're going to see it in clear as day when we get to heaven. We're going to understand, God, your plan was so much greater. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. All of the pieces fit together. Everything will be revealed. Every tear will be wiped away. We're going to see it clearly what God's plan was all along. Hebrews 11, verse 8 through 10 talks about Abraham. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go. That's another component of faith we'll talk about here in a moment. Out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Even that phrase, he was looking forward, means Abraham, in the Greek, it means he was waiting in anticipation for the arrival of someone. It's like, I don't see it yet. I don't have it yet. God, where you're leading me, it's not all that clear, but I am waiting on you. I am trusting in you. My confidence is in you. I know you're going to be faithful to your word, so I know I can trust you and I can follow you. And what we see in this passage in Hebrews, what really defined Abraham's life, we read it in Genesis 12, faith is going to require action. And here's why. Because faith moves you. If you are walking with the Lord, and it is an active faith walk, you are going to have to move. Because the destination of where God is leading you is better than where you are at right now. Here's maybe a more clear way to say it. Faith is moving in obedience to what God is asking. And I can assure you that blessing, and I don't mean this from a monetary standpoint, I'm just saying in general, God's blessing for your life follows obedience. And faith is a walk. It's a walk. Have you ever just observed the way some people walk? There are times that if I am in a hurry, especially some of you've been here, you're in an airport, you're at a mall, you're in a department store, you are on mission, you are trying to get to your destination. Do you ever see the person that's standing in the middle of the terminal and they don't know where they're going? And not only do they not know where they're going, they're not walking, or they'll just stop and they're just kind of wandering, and you almost crash into them like you're offended, like, what on earth are you? Get out of the way. You know, your first thought is, what are you doing? Or why aren't you walking? Like, why aren't you going somewhere? Now, if you were to go back to our hometown in Niles, Ohio, you go to the Eastwood Mall, it is notorious for mall walkers, and these people are absolutely committed. They've got the shoes, they've got the outfit, and you can just see they are on mission when they are walking. They're Fitbit, 10,000 steps, whatever it is. They know where they're headed. Can I tell you, in my walk with the Lord, there have been many times where I've felt like that person that's standing there kind of aimless, or in essence, wandering really in any direction, because if I could look back on seasons where that's defined my life, it's been marked by my life not really being focused on the Lord at all. So I am confused because I'm not walking with him. He hasn't been leading me, so it's hard for me to know where I'm going. It's hard for me to pray and get an answer, because the one that should be leading the way in my life, I've left, and I'm just out there on my own trying to figure out the next step. Other seasons, it's, Lord, where do you want me to go? What are you asking me to do? I'm ready to start walking, but I need you to direct my steps. I wrote this down in my notes this morning, and I hope this helps some of you. You don't have to be the age that Abraham was, but I want you to just receive this regardless of what stage of life that you're in. Single, student, newly married, veteran, senior, don't know where you're at, but this applies to you. Abraham was 75 years old when he obeyed God. 75. Now, we could talk about God gave him a promise that one day he would have a son, and he didn't have that son until 25 years later, so Sarah was almost 100 and she was giving birth. Now, that's gross, but there's a promise here. Sorry. I'm visual when I read the okay, my wife's telling me to stop. Thank you. Sometimes, this is why I married you. I feel like I've been around people at times where the older we get, we can sometimes buy into this lie that the best of what God has for us has passed us by. Like, what I had a chance to do for the Lord, I could have done it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, but my time has passed. Or we've, in essence, we've kind of given up, or we've stopped moving, we've stopped walking, we've kind of moved off to the side. We watch other people pursuing where God's taking them, but we take ourselves out of the game, out of the race. And I hope that you would hear this regardless of what stage of life that you're in. If you have breath in your lungs, if you are sitting here this morning, you still have the opportunity to continue to walk and pursue the plan that God has for your life. You still have time. And I think that some of us, we stop walking because we have let regret make its way into our life. We watch the decisions that we've made in our past, and we think that that regret has to define our future. Some of you have a dream in your heart. I don't know what it is, but it's not too late to see God accomplish it. I don't care how old you are. Some of you have a business idea, maybe that God is stirring in you to go do and to step out and take a step and a leap of faith, and you don't know what that next step could be. It's not too late. Some of us maybe regret the way we raised our kids or what we didn't do when they were growing up, maybe some values that we wish we would have instilled, some things we wish we would have taught them, and now we feel like it's too late. It's not too late. It's not too late for you to lead in your family the way you desire and to keep walking in the direction that the Lord is leading. Faith is believing God enough to go and do. Psalm 37, verse 23 and 24, listen to this. The steps of a man are established by the Lord when he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand. This is clear as day. If you want to know, how do I start walking by faith? Start delighting in the ways of the Lord. Because I'm going to promise you, if you're living in outright sin or you're living in contradiction to God's word, you're going to be very confused on where your life should be headed, because it's his way that puts us on his path. He's the one that leads and guides us. Psalm 119, 105. I love this because it gives such a visual to it. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. So all of a sudden, it's like, God, when I am leaning into your word and your ways, you light my path. You show me where I'm to go. You guide my steps. Psalm 37, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will act. That passage of Scripture does not mean if you trust in the Lord, he's going to give you every desire, self-centered desire that you have in your life. He's going to give it to you. What it means is, as you align yourself with God's word and God's way, he's going to give you desires that line up with his. All of a sudden, God's going to shape your heart, and he's going to show you the things that make his heart beat. He's going to break your heart for the things that break his. That's the difference. That's the difference between a faith walk that's centered on the Lord and a faith that's centered on, what are all the things I can get out of this relationship and acquire from God. One mentality is, how can I get more and more and more from the Lord? And listen, God is a good Father. He gives good things to his children, but our heart needs to be in a place where, Lord, how can you recreate what's going on in here so I can more faithfully follow you? Faith also, it shapes you. When you walk with the Lord for a season in your life, I hope you notice this. As you walk with Christ, your life should look more like Jesus. This is the hope. This is the goal, right? Let's say you've been walking with Christ for 10 years. You should be looking more like Jesus in year 10 than you did at year 1. Far too many Christians, it's been, hey, I've been serving the Lord for 10 years, but I've really just repeated year 1 10 times. I really haven't matured in my walk with Jesus. My life really hasn't looked much different. If in Scripture we're the clay, he's the potter, then things should be changing. Things should be shaped in our life to look more like Christ. So I can look back in my own life. My faith journey has not been perfect. I have messed up plenty. I have wandered plenty of times in my life as I have aimed to follow Christ. So I am not the image of perfection. But I can tell you that I can look back and see who I was years ago, and I can see Jesus has changed me. I can trust that the Lord's done some work in my life. I've been honest with you guys. I was a very angry person, and I wasn't the outward. I was the inward. Like, I'm not going to display it right now, but on the inside, there's like an atomic bomb ready to explode. I was that guy. I was incredibly angry, kicked a door down when Lauren and I were first married that just freaked my wife out. And I had no idea what was on the inside of me. God's shaped that. God's refined that. God's removed that out of my life. I used to be an incredibly stingy person. In all facets of my life, I was so consumed with holding on tightly to everything that I had. There was no way God was getting something out of my hand. I grew up in a very blue-collar family, and it was like the idea of generosity just did not exist. And I remember as the years went by, I thought, man, I just don't like this aspect of who I am. I feel like God wants to do more in my life, and there'd be times where I knew somebody needed something, and I wanted to bless them, but I was afraid and wanted to give something away, but I didn't want to let it go. And can I just tell you, fast forward all these years later, I'm not the most generous person on the planet, but I'm far more generous now than I was back then. Can I tell you that God's plan, regardless of what it is, of how he's shaping your life, it's way better than where you're at right now. He wants to show you some things, shape some things in your life. He wants you to grow to be more like who he is and form our character in that direction. And as I've walked this out, and some of you know this exact same thing, God's shaped your life, and you start with what you have and say, God, I know you want to do more in this area. I'm trusting you as I walk with you. Abraham still had doubts, questions, concerns. Following in faith is not a perfect process. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. Faith does change you. Because at some point, your faith is going to require action. James says, faith without works is dead. And, if you were to research that word dead in the Greek, here's what it means. Dead. It means it's dead. It's inactive. It's worthless. It's nothing. It just simply means that our faith is going to require action. It's scary when you're walking in faith because you don't have the answers. When God asked us to move here, when we felt led to plant a church, I can't even really explain to you how scary that was or how terrified I was to make the move. Because we had so many questions already answered, and this was the great unknown. We don't really know what we're going towards. We don't know what's ahead. We don't know what's on the other side. And can I tell you that? And I'm not using this story. I don't want this to sound about me. I'm saying that as we've walked through even our faith journey of just seeing Keystone over the last 4 years, it's so much better than I ever thought it could be. I have learned to trust the Lord so much more than had we stayed. And listen, this is not about, God may not be calling you to go across the world and be a missionary or plant a church. Maybe he is. Maybe he's stirring your heart. I don't know. But sometimes it's the very basic things. Are we willing to surrender and say, Lord, I'm going to start to follow you. I'm going to start to be faithful. I'm going to start to delight in your way so that you'll show me what's next. Can I tell you it's scary to walk by faith because you're not the one that's in control? You have no answers on the other side. All you know is I've got the Lord and I know who he is. So I know that I can trust him. Stepping out in faith means stepping out in obedience. And here's a statement that I want all of us to hear, and I want this to resonate. A faith that doesn't move you or change you isn't real faith. Because a faith walk with Christ, it's going to compel you to action. Once again, the Lord is not interested in increasing your comfort. He is interested in refining your character. And when you step out in faith, I promise you that will happen. But you've got to be willing to step out. So when you're questioning, when you're doubting, when you're not sure what's next, when you don't know what the answer is, when you don't have it all together, just remember the one that does. Just remember the one that you're following. Remember the one that's leading the way. If you've ever run a half marathon, or maybe you haven't, but you've watched other people do it, they have pace setters. Have you seen these people? They carry a marker, like a minute per mile that you're running, and they set the pace. And the reason these people are out front setting the pace is they know how distracted the runners can get on the course, that at some point, even though they're on the path, they can get distracted, disoriented, and then all of a sudden, they're looking up trying to find out, where am I supposed to be going? More importantly, who am I supposed to be following? And as long as they can find the person that's holding up the flag that represents their pace, they're like, oh, I got it. I know where I'm headed. I know where I'm running. I know who I'm supposed to be aiming towards. Well, that's Christ for us. Keeping our eyes on Jesus. And here's where it gets practical for each and every one of us this morning. Then we're going to close. I want us to ask some honest questions before we pray here today. It's this: what's the Lord asking you to do? Maybe you haven't asked God that question in a while. Like, Lord, what do you have for my life? What's your plan? What's your purpose? What are you asking me to do? How are you asking me to step out? Where do you need to step out of your comfort zone and believe God in faith with a next step? Lord, I don't want to just simply believe. I want my faith to be put into action. As James says, I want some works to be put behind this. It may need to start with repenting and asking the Lord, I'm asking that you forgive me because I've been trying to control where I go, what I do, and I'm like the person that's standing there wandering around aimlessly, wondering, Lord, why don't I have any direction for my life? Start to delight in the Lord and in his ways, because his word is a lamp to your feet, a light to your path. He'll direct you and show you if you'll first surrender and say, God, I'm going to have you lead the way. I'm tired of trying to figure it out on my own. For others, it's, Lord, change the desires in my life so they match your desires for my life. Please understand, there's nothing wrong with having goals, with having dreams. I believe many of us, you've had them, you've seen them fulfilled in your life, and those are very God-centered, God-ordained moments for every single one of us. That's awesome. But only you can know in your own walk with the Lord, is everything that your desire is. It's almost as like, is my walk with Christ only a walk with Christ so that he can fulfill what I desire? Or am I following Jesus because I want to go where he's leading and I want to fulfill his desires. That's where faith can feel scary. That's where faith can feel uncertain. But can I tell you, that is a place where when your faith goes into action, that's where God moves. There's nothing more exciting than living a life that's marked by faith, where you're following and aiming to be obedient, where God's asking you to go and doing what God asks you to do. You can be reassured that even when you mess up, when it's not perfect, when you wander from the path, when you have questions, when you have doubts, it's just like Abraham, we saw it, God's still faithful. God's going to remain faithful. God's setting the pace. He's out in front. He's waving the flag. So whenever you get off track, you can always find the one that's leading the way, and you can start to realign your life spiritually with where you need to go. And it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with him. That's the kind of faith that I want to live. That's the kind of faith I want our church to live. That's the kind of faith I believe God desires that we would all walk in. We're saying, Lord, you're directing my steps. You're guiding my path. Your word's going to be a light. Your word's going to be a lamp. Lord, give me the strength, the ability, the faith to say yes to wherever you're asking me to go and to say yes to whatever you're asking me to do. In Jesus' name.